Hello, welcome back to Bus Stops. My name is Nick. These are all the pictures I took at bus stops in Richmond, Virginia, and we're going to talk about one of them today. So what I like to do is just spin a roulette wheel, close my eyes, and let my right hand touch upon the scroll right key. And as I just see flashes of different images coming across my eyelids, eventually I will stop and we'll talk about this image. Now, yes, okay, it took me a second to remember exactly where I took this image. And where I took the image is not important. A lot of times I think one of the hardest things for photographers to do is to separate themselves from the emotions that they had when they took an image, their intentions when they took an image, their hopes for an image. And that's part of what makes this process fun for me is to be surprised by my own work is at least helpful for my photographic and artistic process. Perhaps it may be if you are an artist or if you enjoy art. I hope that the appeal of this series is that you get to hear me process and digest my own work in a semi-random fashion. But if you're an artist, I hope that you can figure out ways it's kind of like the classic, if you turn your painting upside down, you kind of get a better sense of how to compose it and how to, what it might be lacking in terms of a articulation of certain colors or methods or composition or whatever. It's always you turn anything you're working on upside down and you can get a better sense of it visually. It regains some of its freshness that you might have lost by staring at the same thing over and over again. And so in a photographic sense, photographers generally seem to have a hard time. At least I have a hard time, and I assume others do. Forgive my overgeneralization if it's such a thing, but yeah, photographers have a hard time distancing themselves from what they intend to do or what they hope to do or what they think they're doing when they take an image. And so when they make an image, forgive me, I prefer to use the verb make rather than take. Any practicing fine art photographer who chooses to burden themselves with such a label should approach it with the intentionality of making something rather than capturing it. We're not on safari, or we're not in animal control chasing down a loose possum. We're not taking something. We're capturing it. We're coming to it with the intentionality of an artist. At least we try to. So this is an image that I made, and yeah, I stalled for time there for a little bit to kind of jog my memory about where exactly this image was taken, because even though that's not important to the image, it's important to me. This is an image that's sort of so anonymous of location that I actually struggled to remember where I was standing, where my feet were planted. And even though I can't remember exactly, I at least remember the road. And that gives me some bearings on how to talk about this image, because nonetheless, I do have a whole lifetime's worth of experiences and biases and whatever else you want to call it, informing what I choose to point my camera at. So this is an image of a telephone pole. I strive to have this mindset with every image I take, that there's like a little twist with every picture. If you think of the, I'm sure other photographers have come up with better names for this, but this is how I think about it. There's like the subject, which is the first thing, and then there's usually some kind of twist. This could be anything from kind of like the compositional arrangement, that, for lack of a better word, that you place the subject into. And like in this case, the subject is of course the telephone pole up and down, but like the composition kind of has this fussy characteristic to it. It has, the pole is in the dead center of the frame, and then we kind of have this slanting, like at a slight angle facing of the camera, so that everything sort of falls away slightly to the right, in a very loose perspective. But the fussiness is like, if you want to make a picture like this, for some reason, it's really important to pay a lot of attention to all of the, like, what comes into the frame where. And so my critical eye, which searches for the smallest flaws, is attracted first to like the edge of this telephone junction box or whatever it is. It's attracted to this like tiny stick that comes up here into the corner of the frame. It's attracted to this letter form that's slightly cut off, that A, and then this little patch of dirt. Those are like the imperfections that my eye jumps to as methods. Unfortunately, all of those can be addressed by bringing in the frame slightly, cropping it in slightly. And so I probably do that after I finish talking about this picture, I don't want these, by the way, I've mentioned before, but I don't want them to turn into like seminars on editing. Or kind of, again, I'll mention it again, but some of these pictures have been edited already and this one has not been. And so I don't want to like just say like, oh, and then we bring the shadows up in order to get detail here. Like that's not, to me, that's not particularly interesting. You know, what I'm trying to do here is just kind of visually digest the picture and help you see what I'm trying to see. And it helps me see too, because believe it or not, staring at something for 8 to 12 minutes so far as the range that these have fallen in, but I see new things too. I see this little bit of paste or something right there. Let me see if I can zoom out a little bit, just a tiny bit. I see a little bit of paste there. I see kind of this little M, you know, looking down this zoomed in. I see a tiny little nail right there holding that M into the pole. I see this, the fact that the casing of this tire has exploded. You know, I see those bits of leaves and spider webs and everything. And so I didn't necessarily see all that when I made the image. I see this tiny green wire that sort of meanders down the face of the brick and exits the frame. And yeah, sorry, I was talking about compositional elements. Yeah, so the second order I think of a lot of times is the composition, the graphic elements of the frame. And so it's important to consider how things intrude on the periphery of the frame. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. When you want to make an image like this, you have to pay a lot of attention to how things are composed. And so I think, like, again, this image is unedited. And so I always take a lot of care when I'm making a picture like this to check check the level. Like the R5 has a built-in level. And so when you're holding the camera, you can actually see, you know, whether your horizon is tilted and whether your vertical lines are skewed based on the vertical angle, based on the horizontal angle of the camera and the vertical angle of the camera, respectively. And so this picture looks pretty darn near flat, and that is like a camera that is perfectly parallel to the horizon horizontally and parallel to the ground plane front and back. And so you see that like every vertical line in this photo is parallel to the edge of the frame, and the horizon, as it were, you know, you can kind of even see the horizon or start to see the horizon off of that line right there. The horizon is parallel, and so every horizontal line is parallel. And so that's my fussiness of an architectural photographer coming into this. But it's important when you make an image like this, because if the edge of the frame is sloppy and if your lines start to go all over the place, like this would be a much worse photo if the top of this window were clipped off. Not necessarily, like if it went on to infinity or looked like it kept going and going, that would be one thing, kind of like this pole. Like just because this pole is clipped doesn't mean it's a bad picture, but like clearly it goes on and on and on. And so that becomes a different type of compositional element. But like if the edge of, if this edge were clipped off, but that corner were in play, like I'd just throw this photo out, quite honestly, or I would have just made it different when I made the picture. But sometimes you can't catch everything. And so like a little branch like that or that box, like those are things that you can crop out or adjust the frame or whatever you want to do. So yeah, that's like the second order is sort of, you have the subject, in this case, the pole. And then you have the second order thing, and you can think of that as composition, but like I would also think of that as like this tire, you know, kind of like a little complicating factor of a story. Like maybe it's kind of a bad metaphor, but it's like the conflict in a story. Yeah, so it's like one day there was a pole, but then there was a busted up tire, and the pole had to, you know, it's kind of the hero's journey, I guess. You know, every story needs a conflict, and so every picture needs like a thing that complicates the composition a little bit, makes you ponder, makes you think about things. But you know, the best photos that I find that I take, the photos that I like the most, are photos that have like a third or a fourth order of interesting to them. And so in this case, my mind sort of ponders of this like murky depth within the window. And you know, it's easy to get sort of carried away photographing reflections or dark things like that, but like that's why it needs to be a third order thing, you know. it would have been hard to convince you of this could be a photo on its own. If that were, in other words, the brick wall would have to, or excuse me, the telephone pole would have to be gone. Nothing else on the wall. Like if it were just pure grass, pure gravel, and it was just this window, that would start to be an interesting photo just because of the emptiness of everything but that. But in this case, because and I'm a little bit at the mercy of what I can see or look at from the vantage point of the bus stop. And so there are ways to make that photo maybe if I moved around a little bit. But in this case, I just kind of had to make what I could see. Just the fact that in this window, you even start to see some of the office. And it's interesting even zooming in because you lose some of that. It's kind of hard to forensically analyze what's in that office, but even just the faintest view of it when you look at it from a more pulled back perspective, it kind of looks like a pencil or a cup of pencils to my eye, and then maybe a desk. That's usually about desk height right there, and then maybe a piece of paper or something. But it kind of blends seamlessly into the green of the grass on the adjacent side of the road. I think that's the road right there even. So it kind of hovers between road and desk, and then obviously another office building, and then the trees and the sky. But the sky has that same, it has this double flip of sky and then fluorescent light, which is kind of interesting. You would think of the sky as being above a fluorescent light or brighter than a fluorescent light, but the darkness of the window distorts it, and then this light sort of becomes the brighter thing in the frame. And I think this also draws your eye up into the more interesting bits of the telephone pole. I love this sort of 1-2 action of horizontal element, and then you have vertical, vertical, vertical. And so everything draws you up because most of the interesting stuff is up here. And yet nonetheless, we do have these nicely horizontal elements coming down. And then you have effectively a horizon right there. And then you have this big ugly tire that sort of roots your eye down towards the bottom of the frame, and then sort of the elegant way which the telephone pole hits the ground and just stops, and yet continues on up indefinitely. I love these numbers on telephone poles, power poles, whatever you want to call it. Something about there's 3 different, A356 or whatever number letters before that. And then G2300, JJ96, and it looks like Verco or Vepco or something there on that little nameplate. And so just having all of the identifiers of a pole kind of sets my mind spinning. Even this little M down here, it's this pole has so much personality built into it. And I don't expect that interest to carry the weight of meaning within a picture, even though there is another picture I'm thinking of that's kind of all I photographed was just those little name badges. And it's not visually interesting enough. There's not, and that's why I sort of talked about this first, second, third ordering of interesting elements within a photograph. If all you have is one, if I just sort of zoom in and focus on this one thing, then it doesn't have anything sort of complicating it. It doesn't have anything underpinning or rather complicating. Yeah, complicating is a better word, not underpinning. It doesn't have anything complicating or demanding in it that sort of invites you to continue looking and considering. The more I've talked about this photo, the more I personally like it. When I landed on it, I don't think I said it, but I was tempted to say oh, this is one of the less interesting photos. But just something about the weird green, blue, red triad of this image. You have blue, green, red, all in sort of one quick succession, but then the green of this sort of travels up and is mediated by the brown of the telephone pole. It's actually kind of nice. Again, not I would say that not every element of this photo is equally strong in terms of coalescing into just an absolute barnstormer of an image, but yeah, I kind of like it actually. The more I look at it, this has been Bus Stops. Thank you for listening.